Well, good morning, everyone. I am welcome to the session called Coordination and the GC Dilemma. I guess this little sidebar down here with Brian. Yes, indeed. I think everybody in this room is here because they know there's a bit of a challenge when it comes to projects, large projects that are managed by general contractors. I am Jim Henry. I am Executive Vice President of Kratos PS&S. In my earlier career, I was CEO of Henry Brothers Electronics for about 135 years, and then Kratos acquired us back in 2010, and I moved into the EVP position, and I've been there since, which is now pushing 7 years. Joining me for today's discussion, I do mean discussion, is Ben Butchko from Butchko Inc., Chris Grniet from Guidepost, and Chrissy McCutcheon from Security by Design, all very esteemed and tenured consultants from your world. So, I thought I would tee the session up by just framing how we got here. Post 9/11, security is not the largely unfunded afterthought that it was from the 1960s through 2001. That is both good and bad. Capital funding for large security programs and projects is essential, but too often public agencies, commercial enterprises, empower general contractors to more than manage sophisticated integrated electronic security systems, treating them like other construction trades. So the question that all of the other rest of the session is to address is, are security consultants best positioned and able to guide their clients on the most beneficial roles for the client, if it's an important participatory role here, it's not a spectator's point, the security consultant, the security systems integrator, and the GC to ensure functional expectations are achieved during and after project completion. So the first question is really a tee up to the second question, and then we'll have a little discussion. But how often do you believe that your peers, your consultants, are retained by your client without interruption from the design stage through the award process, project execution, and system acceptance? All the time, more than half the time, less than half the time? Who would go for A? Thoughts? How about B? Is it more than half? Okay. And by default, is everybody else less than half the time? Do you believe there is a direct correlation between successful projects and uninterrupted engagement of the design consultant? Absolutely. Yes is A, B is somewhat, C is not a key driver of success or failure. Who would say absolutely yes? I don't even think you know the other two.
No one here is biased.
Yeah.
But without bias, someone has to take that role of watching out for the mission and what programmatically needs to be performed. If the consultant doesn't do it, then the consultant needs to advise that role is filled somehow in the client organization.
And that's for a letter of relief.
The letter of relief, release letter, it was really nice, except how many of your Fortune 500 companies are going to write a letter of release when they've already given you to sign an indemnification that says you're giving away your next 18 generations of firstborn if you screw it up.
I volunteer my firstborn.
Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I think when we talk about the success of a project, though, there are so many players in that process that the failure of security to be implemented properly isn't necessarily seen as a failure to the project. When we're dealing with the architects, the general contractors, and everybody else who just wants to get a CFO and walk out the door, that's a successful project to them. To us, that's a failure, right? I often tell a lot of rooms full of integrators, we're not here to argue with you. We're not here to make you look bad. We need to help each other. And we spend a lot of time with the client prior to a project. If we're allowed to come in at that beginning stage from the inception of what's going on to determine what needs to be implemented, how it needs to be implemented, and how it's going to function thereafter. And everybody else in the room, once that project starts, has no vision of that unless you insert it. And you continue to insert it and argue it and get it done. So it is a challenge. For me, the success is watching it come to fruition, regardless of anybody else's participation in that process. So the gambit of how that hits and how successful each one is changes from job to job. And it depends on the other participants as well, no matter how much we insert ourselves.
So one of the challenges is often that a client, whoever you're interfacing with for security, often doesn't last from the beginning of the design phase through project fruition. So having the consultant actively involved through the entire process, you're the one steady state POC that knows why a decision was made early in the process, why you value engineered something out that should have been there, whatever, who made those decisions, and you have the emails to track that and be able to explain in the future why a decision was made, because whoever the facility manager is that happens to be in charge of security now is gone somewhere else. So I think it's really important to have the security consultant there the whole time.
No, that continuity is huge. Comments, questions? And without running around, skating around with microphones here, I got pretty good hearing yet despite my golden years. I'll repeat the question so everybody can hear it. Engagement. Good. Okay. How often do you believe consultants that are retained for most of the project by their client are excluded from the down select process and final award of a contract to systems integrators when a general contractor has been hired to manage a project? Again, almost all the time, more than half the time, or less than that. Who would state that this is a 90 plus?
I'm on the fence about it. It's gotten a lot worse. The last 10 years, it's gotten a lot worse.
There's a lot to be said about that, right?
Yeah.
When we go in and we speak to a client, we get retained. Part of that pitch, part of that value process that we explain to them is that we understand the market. We gave you a raw budget. We're going to get you as close to that as we possibly can, but you can't do it without our help. Despite what the general contractor and the construction manager, and now they're, everything in between, says to you. There are some big projects, and there are some small projects where the GC ultimately is in the back room driving budget with the owner, telling them how expensive everything else is, and we can cut some corners over here on security and make that work for you. The people holding those purse strings typically aren't your POCs from the security side of the house or the facilities side of the house. And even the facilities people, if it's not their primary function, look at the budget, and sure enough, we're going to wind up with electric strikes instead of electric board system, or we're going to wind up with a different vendor than we ever anticipated, even though we had to go through the entire process of product selection, who's in the region to support it, who's gonna bring the best value to you, who's the most qualified to get it done. And the GC gets inserted in there and says, yeah, well, I got this guy who done a Berg system in my last project. I'm doing 20 floors of commercial, not the retail store that you did down the street with ADT, right? So it's, or whomever it is. And, you know, Jim, you know, we have these some electrical houses who don't know what they're doing. But it's that whole mix up in divisions, who's responsible for what. I don't know what Division 28 is. They never saw it before. And then depending on how you put that together, all of the coordination that needs to happen amongst all those other trades, and I think we get to the question at some point, they tear it all up because they're trying to get the cheapest and make the most money they can out of the project.
How come no read the specs? They go to the drawings and put it.
Well, your point, real quick, Chuck, your point of half of them don't read the specs, as we roll in, I would say it's not that half of them don't read the specs. I would say there's a significant history in what we've seen is they're never given the specs and the drawing package together. They may be given once, and it varies even when it goes to an integrator. The integrator may get both the specs and the drawings, but the project lead that's in the field, all he ever gets is the drawings. He's never seen the specs, which has the description of what's actually supposed to be achieved. And it's where you turn off, as Chris said, where you turn off the project. If you turn off the project when you turn the power on and all the lights flash when they're supposed to, and you're done, and no one has done that transition over to who's going to use this and actually have to make this 300-pound chrome anvil something that's actually a tool. It's the idea of, I can sell you a truck and I can even do the maintenance and tell you how that you're supposed to change the oil every so often and where it is. And I can tell you how to put in the key and turn it on. But if no one tells you how to navigate and where to build the load in the back of that truck, that if you put everything on the tailgate and you turn on the lights, you're going to be lighting up low-flying aircraft because you're so off balance. That whole process is where someone has to take ownership. And sometimes as consultants, I know we're the tail wagging the dog because no one wants to pay for us. And I kind of, as much as I enjoy this, at a point doing this as a hobby where I'm not getting paid, it's old. So you have to run it where you can, but the roadblocks are not always the GC. In one project where we were yesterday, just last week, the first time we got to talk to the chief of police was after they let the contracts for all of the equipment that we spec. It was the construction department of this district that was making sure that they were the key point, and we came in under the architect. We were excluded from talking to the end users, no matter how hard we pushed. So we've got our CYA file, but who cares at the end, except when it comes in and we're supposed to hire lawyers against a mega organization that's going to bleed us dry before we ever win.
I'm going to ask a question. From the consultant side, how many times have you walked in to do a site inspection and there's been changes made? You had no idea they were made, right? But it's too late. It's too late. It's already doors up, doors working, you're done. How many times do you have to call yourself and say, when can I get over there and do an inspection or a test? When can I certify the system? When can I do a commissioning process? And everybody goes, what do you mean? The project's done. It's over. Contractor's done. And then it's all on how you buy the project. We can talk about, there'll be other questions. How it gets bought. Who's doing what? Who's the low voltage cable puller? Who's the electrician? Who's the hardware guy? Who's the carpenter? And that's when they tear the spec up, even if they see it. Because all those other bits and pieces get bought by other trades and they're never coordinated as hard as you try during the design process to get it integrated. So it runs the gamut.
Well, question 4 actually is like a part 2 to question 3, and it'll give us even more discussion. So I say here on, when a consultant is excluded from the down select and the award negotiations, whose decision do you believe that is? I think that already starts to get partially answered here. Is it mostly the client or is it mostly the GC?
It's mostly the GC.
So for us, most of the GC, and like Chris was saying, they're in the back room having a coordination meeting with the client, saying, hey, by the way, we could save some money over here if you just do this. And so I think that, you know, the client's just willing to listen to the GC, and as long as the GC excludes the consultant from that, then they get their way more often.
Well, as I get into, you know, more of the questions on this, I really, you know, shine light on the fact that the client isn't just one entity. The client so often has a development group and an operations group. So you're really only addressing, most of the times, just that construction division of the client, who is basically got the same myopic view of just the construction phase with the GC, and without adult supervision, you know, on that, from the best interests of the owner and the long-term interest, which is where the consultants, the integrators, the manufacturers really, and the operations department have a stakeholder, you know, have a stakeholder for the end result. That's where that's where the problems get together. Chris said it right at the beginning. He said what they define as success. It's not what we define as success. And that's really where, if everybody doesn't have that same vision, you know, everybody's not going to have the same perspective, and that's why you want to bring all those perspectives together as a team for the duration to make sure that all of those interests are, you know, addressed.
I would say that both answers are correct. They're equally culpable in some of those instances, a lot of those instances. How many of you as consultants have gotten a call from XYZ contractor, you don't even know who they are, to ask you about questions on your specification or your drawings that you just released as 100% DD?
Yeah.
Because the GC took it and put it out on the street. Jim, how many times has your office got a package that says 100% DD? We want you to price this for us. And it's out on the street, and you don't even support the products that are going in. You got a set of plans, but nobody gave you the spec. And they're out trying to do the best job they can the way they know how. We get that. But again, inserting yourself, all of the different players from client's organization, if it is not strictly a security project, I get asked all the time, how do you want to buy this? How can we buy this? Can we buy this with the security contractor sub to the electrical contractor? Can I pull the cable with a low voltage person? Or does the security person have to do that? I'll do it any way you want. Just make sure I'm part of that process.
This all comes back down to two things. Number one, the focus that the GC and the client have on cost control and cost reduction. And then secondly, they also have a focus at contract signing time with the consultant on indemnification. And that's the moment when we have leverage for control over the whole rest of the project. And most consultants, I think, don't take advantage of that moment. So basically what we used to put in our proposals was an exclusion clause on the indemnification, that if we are not included in the process from beginning all the way to acceptance, and if decisions are made which we believe compromise the integrity of the system, the indemnification clause becomes moot. And so we have an incredible hammer to hold the client and the GC to the integrity of the drawings and the specifications. And the pushing out of DD drawings for bidding is a perfect example of that time. All right, we've already pushed out an estimated DD budget. So they have a budget, but they want to validate that budget, so they get it out on the street. And then, you know, Joe's Pool Hall used cars, Venetian blinds, yard work and security provides a quote on that that's 40% under our budget. And so they want to take that instead of the budget. Fine, take it. You just excluded our indemnification clause. So, the minute that we bring that up, all of a sudden Joe is disqualified.
And I agree.
Is that the exception of the rule, of that indemnification clause? Is that,
Well, you started the conversation talking about post 9/11 in large agencies. You've never worked with the Port Authority apparently, or the MTA, or, when's the last time you were able to insert your language in one of their contracts? Right? I get it, you're perfectly right, and our role as a consultant, we should be able to push those buttons and make that happen.
Well, you have to have your attorney fighting. The most important clause in the proposal is the indemnification clause. And I think very few consultants really understand that.
Trust me.
It is the most important clause there. And if my attorney can't win a fight in which I have control over the integrity of the process so that we have a defensible security system at the end of the project, I don't want that project.
Are you a sole proprietor?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Good luck. It doesn't happen. I go in front of committees, we have go, no-goes, we look at those challenges, we fight those fights, we get as much indemnification as we possibly can. But for those people who work for the ACOMs and the larger corporations that are about revenue, profitability, personnel, and corporate value, it's very challenging. And you'll get a contract from these agencies. We have turned down work because we can't identify. We feel the risk is too high. We do that.
Well, the risk is absolutely too high when you don't have control over the integrity of the system.
But the notices of, here's the proof, here's what I did, good record keeping, tracking everything you've ever said or done, or the decisions that were made in the beginning of the project. I'll sit on the court, on the stand all day long, and I've had people do it. The MTA had a massive project to do security across their entire enterprise, and they took the security contractor and the electricians to court over the failure of the project. It wasn't a failure of the specifications, but at the end of the day, they held the consultant culpable too. And other firms got hired to be on their side, and other firms got hired to be on the contractor's side. As long as the documentation's there, ultimately the MTA won because they didn't have it. They didn't have the backup of what is it supposed to be, what is it supposed to do in a very clear, concise, and cogent manner. They didn't have it. I'm confident that when I do it, I've got it. And so I'm less concerned sometimes about that liability clause when I get into those projects. But for everything else, our standard contract says I'm even going to be held, you're going to indemnify me from anything related to this project, no matter what, because I'm not installing it, I'm not the one making it function, I'm not the one who's going to operate it at the end of the day. All I'm giving you is a concept, a strategy, an idea of how we can make your life more secure and safe. So I don't disagree with you, but it's a challenge on those bigger projects.
comment on that one? That's huge. Tom, if we could have that would be...
Well, I've won that battle against the Port of Houston Authority, against the Delaware River Port Authority, $70 million project. So, I fought that battle on big projects and have won it.
I see both sides. Certainly, I've lived Chris's life for decades here, and you go into these, you bring up all your issues and what have you, but you're basically told, okay, you get the addendum, or the attachment, or the schedule, whatever it's addendums A, C, I forget what it is now. It's got all the T's and C's. Which do you comply with? Which do you comply with the intent of, and which don't you comply with? You fill out all the entries. Then you hand it back to them, and they say, okay. Just to let you know, you're not getting this project unless you answer yes to every one. So just throw money, at the ones that you don't. But you have to accept this exactly as it is without exception.
In those bigger markets, I don't even need a microphone. In those bigger markets, there's somebody always standing right behind you who's willing to take on that risk, period, end of story. So it becomes a business decision in many cases.
Well, all of it, it's always a business decision whether you're going to take a job or not, what terms and conditions you're going to take or not. And when you know you're in the right, and yet you are still getting screwed, it's still a business decision as to how much you're going to invest to try and get back the money that you're losing. And what that time value of is. And unfortunately, I don't know how many of y'all, but I personally had to make that deal of, yes, I know I'm right, but the amount of time and energy and emotion and everything else and disruption of my business to win is going to be more. So I'll win the battle, but I won't lose the war because I've been so diverted that I haven't been able to keep my revenue up to keep everybody else making payroll and all the other projects.
Yeah.
And just because it sucks doesn't mean I just have to suck it up. Not in every case, but more often than not. And in our clients, when we're dealing with Shell, we're dealing with ConocoPhillips, we're dealing with mega companies, they just wait us out. So 7 years from now, we'll get a judgment. Great. That doesn't do me much good when payroll's due in 2 weeks.
Sometimes you just cut your losses. There are a lot of projects over the years where I've had the conversation, the direct and frank conversation with the stakeholders that when I showed up at the project and found those changes that took place, I don't need to say the indemnification clause is going to kick in because I'll say I operated with integrity, the project team didn't, and I'll walk away because I'm not going to make that investment. I can't test this because I never vetted that change. And that's where I start to warn them very early on. When I see anything happening from the general contractor side, anywhere down the line that's going to change the intent, scope, function of what I've designed.
Yeah, I used to have a saying that conducted in project meetings when we had a contractor who had done work that was in conflict with the specs or somehow didn't perform. And they would report that and start to argue that with me. And I would basically say, you're welcome to do anything that you want to do that you don't want to get paid for.
And one of our best clients over time was one that we fired. Now, it happened to be as the end user piece, not the GC that for this discussion, but it's that, what are we willing to put on the line? So we terminated the contract and walked out. Well, they weren't all that pleased. But when it came out and then they figured out that we maintained integrity through that process and they couldn't get it done, then they came back and then it was really nice because they were begging us and we could write our own ticket to come in. So we had a choice, do we really penalize them or do we come back in? But overall, it's that if we come back to how we're managing it, those pieces can come in because the GC is mismanaging the project from an operations perspective, or the integrator is doing so, or the construction organization is doing so, or it's incompetence on the end user side. It's either incompetence or indifference. In many cases, those end users, they're running all 100 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone trying to get their job done. And so they've outsourced it to their development, real estate, construction departments that solve our problem. This is what we told you we wanted. And so the construction department is doing what they think is their job, and they're working with the GC. And even if everyone's trying to do what they think in their little sandbox is the right thing, unless there is someone who's taking that program management view, which is trying to make sure that everybody in the silos is doing what's in their own best interest is for the operations good. It doesn't matter whether it's the GC or the integrator or the construction department or whoever. Unless that role is filled, that's where the risk that we all live with. And the consultant can be just as culpable in living in that world, whether because they because they are incompetent, or they're too busy, or they haven't been paid to get engaged, or they just don't know how to ask it and be persuasive enough. So everybody has a chance to screw it up. And it's nice to throw it on somebody else who's making the decisions to save money. But all of this is a money situation.
Yeah, I said earlier that the one time when you have an opportunity to control that is at the indemnification clause. There is a second time that is equally important, and that is when you're asked to accept the contract. And as a consultant, I won't sign an acceptance paper on a contract that doesn't conform to drawings and specifications. And I'll send out a letter stating that I can't sign off on this because it doesn't conform. So now it's up to somebody else to sign off on that. They just bought the liability on that project.
And you can system accept to what they said they were told to do, and you can system accept to what was in the design and spec, and you can call out the deviations. And effectively, you're not totally accepting, you're accepting these pieces, and you're shifting that responsibility elsewhere. That's a cover your butt. That doesn't cover the operations need that organization needs. And if we're wrong, folks hire us to keep them from having problems. That's why we charge a premium. And if we don't, if we manage a project and we do a crummy job and it comes out poorly, we look like hell. If we're hired in for a project, we do a really good design, but we don't, for whatever reason, the integrator doesn't do a good job, we still look like hell because we were there, so it wasn't supposed to go wrong. The GC is in that similar role. And as the project goes, we design it well, the project goes well, and now we've married the integrator to the end user, then everybody's happy, and a lot of times they're so happy they don't need us anymore because they've got a great relationship with that integrator. But yet, that's where they hire us so that they don't have those problems, whether we're the cause or not, and whether it's a GC problem or not. And if they don't engage us to where we can do that, it's behooves it to us to go to them and to go into and get the words to the folks that are going to have to carry this freight after the keys have been turned over and say, this is where you are setting yourself up at risk of failure. And we can help you if you allow us, but if you don't allow us, you need to fill that gap somehow. And that 30-minute or 1-hour conversation, we may not get paid for it, but that's what's protected our reputation and allowed us to get recommendations and a lot of times extra service requests from, in this last week, the chief of police, because all of a sudden we'd given him a path to a solution that his own organization had prevented him from getting. Whether that comes through or not, at least he has a chance to win now, and our reputation has a chance of not getting thrown under the bus because other people weren't carrying the freight correctly.
We have, a lot of it is getting a good relationship with the GC and avoiding any of those issues where you show up late and everything's closed up and it's wrong, whatever. If you're setting up regular meetings, project managing, and okay, we're going to do the box walk with everybody and we can call it all out when everything's still open and address all the issues. You just have to stay involved in the process the whole time. And most of the time, you can identify when something's wrong and get it fixed while it's still a whole lot cheaper than once the walls are closed up or you have everything done incorrectly, the wrong part or whatever. You can make sure that all those things get addressed, you call it out, and you don't allow the client to be a victim of the construction process.
The door and frame pre-order, the doors were already on their way. I didn't know it needed water sense. I didn't know it needed electronic images, right?
And how many meetings have you had with
Exactly.
the door company prior to?
0, because the general contractor excluded you from that process.
I insert myself. I don't allow
We
to
all
be
try.
excluded.
We all try.
And the inertia from, speaking from the security area, when you're in these meetings, and there is a conflict, that comes up with it, and you send up an RFI, the hysteresis sometimes, that time frame for it to go through the electrical, the GC, by the time it gets, how often, do I pick up the phone and it heads up, that's a question, is it really important? You need to be, because you may not see it until, 3 weeks from now, and we need the answer three weeks and 1 day from now. That's the only way to deal with
Well,
it.
you need it
But if you're in
at-
the meetings, you may still take it back, under advisement, for consideration, but at least there's not that black hole and gap of time by the time it gets through the consultant, if they even want to table it to the consultant, or they build up the last 50, over the next 90 days and hire you for a week, to deal with these, stack of 50 RFIs. We titled this the GC dilemma, but I firmly believe that GCs were not born evil, right? They follow what they're contracted to do. So many times the problem is the end user, and when it really looks like it's the GC, it's because the end user didn't put the cheese where they want the mice to go with the GC. And that's really, so we're really talking about the construction team than just, the GC as part of that. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, more of my projects are directly with, with the client, and there isn't a GC involved. Instead, it's not a replacement or anything, not an equivalent. Instead, it's procurement. The same thing can happen. And I just give one example where everybody was on board, the client, and it was the board of directors who was the one that said, bring this team in and do the security thing and all this stuff. And so all up and down, all the I's were dotted and T's crossed on relationship with the client and getting the stakeholders and all that stuff. But the company ran into it. So this was I think a $2 million project altogether, so not maybe some of the sizes that I'm talking about. But the company ran into a financial bind and told procurement, all your projects, everything you have going on, you got to take 10% out or 5% out or whatever of everything. So the integrator happened to hear about this on the discussion and found a way to get out of their jam that they were in, because they said, well, if we don't do the factory acceptance test, we give you $10,000 back. And so procurement said, done deal. And we found out after they had already signed done the whole thing and made that whole arrangement. It was a very hard fight. In fact, it wasn't a fight that I could win, but the project manager, an employee of the company, was a PE and a very accomplished engineer in their organization. And she was assigned this project because it was important to the board, and it was her under threat of being fired because she put her foot down and so on that got that whole thing undone. But on the consultant side, I was powerless. But the same kind of things can happen as you're talking about with the GC phenomena. Our first reaction was, oh, not procurement again. But it really wasn't procurement. It really came from the very people that were shaking my hand earlier and said, take 10% out of it.
So the piece there where the cost cut and you take out the testing as the example. And yeah, that's money that you didn't spend. One thing that has worked for us that we can all do, and we do it, and it came up in one of the pieces yesterday, Chris, if you said it or whoever, but in a different way, if we can define with and get acceptance across the operation user, the construction user, and that team is what constitutes in a summary level, what constitutes success of this project. Is it demonstrated performance? Is it the fact that when you open the door, the building doesn't fall in and the walls don't fall over? And what's the criteria that's going to say, when that's clear and everybody buys in, that success means that the building exists and and authorized people are allowed to get in and out, and we show that at the final piece. That can be sort of that linchpin that when all the players buy in, they can look to and say, there's 8,000 details related to this that's embedded in the integrator and the cable guy and the GC and everybody else. but at least there's something that stays through the life of the project that can be that litmus test. That's a starting point to at least get people to think beyond their myopic view when pressure is running because dollars are running out, or the weather got bad, or there was some other thing that came up, which now the schedule got compressed from 3 years down to 2 weeks. And what are we going to do? Well, that's one piece that has helped us, but it still takes someone to be the champion to maintain that adherence and the reminder that says, yeah, what the hell were we trying to do when we started this?
Give you all a saying, there is no value engineering if you've done security right. There is only risk assumption.
That's right.
So, you know, I've often told clients, I'll give them that warning before we get into this process, is we've chosen this, we've selected this, we've put this together for the best intentions and the way it's going to work for you. Any deviation after that is risk assumption. Now, the project design might change. We all get contracted in many different ways. Sometimes I love being part of the architectural team. Other times I don't want anything to do with them. A lot of times I like being directly contracted by the owner. But all of a sudden that construction team is out there, you're just another end user to them. Even if you're representing the owner in your best intent, you're not part of the process. Drawings come late, oh, we need your drawings in 2 days. What drawings? Oh yeah, the schedule for deliverables. You didn't see that? It changed. You know, and then you get excluded from that coordination. And you have to insert yourselves. You have to talk about changes being risk. You have to warn the general contractor and all those other participants at the earliest possible meeting you can even meet them sometimes, that pay attention to security, or I'm going to come back and it's going to cost you money. It's not going to cost the client money. It's not going to cost me time and money. It's going to cost you. Because to your point, Tom, hey, thanks for doing that for free. Thanks for coming today. But that's not what we wanted. So it runs the gambit. I think it's an inherent problem across the industry on how security is treated depending on the participants in a process. Whether it's a big organization or a small company, all of those problems, all of those challenges, and all those successes can exist simultaneously. And there's no one good answer.
I think picking up on closing on what Chris just said, risk assumptions. I mean, the only thing that gets people's attention is risk. You're approaching it from the contractual perspective of legally assuming it. When you get into the large public agencies, nobody ever has accountability, right? And they've got so many lawyers, you'll never get to Ben's point, it'll be 5 years, by the time you get the proceeds of whatever you're going to lose. But one thing I think we need to leverage, because there's always a silver lining in any black cloud, and that is the power of public opinion. And when it comes to the public agencies, they do not like being splattered across the front page of the paper on how incompetent they are and failures and blah, 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 blah. And we've had a motherload of them in the last 2 years. So, I think that there is a chance, I hope it's bigger than the chance in the Dumb and Dumber movie, but that we can leverage the recent foray of all of these, very public catastrophes with regards to, there's all sorts of words for it, but, these projects that have just, dominated the news for weeks on end, say, all right, do you want to have, your agents, the execs in your agency have to deal with the political, ramifications of your decisions to divert from the formula here that's going to get you to that end result, and then there's an audit trail in those meetings, the minutes of those meetings, that they were forewarned that those are the consequences. Rather than throwing the legal threat of you'll be accountable, you'll get into the papers. And that's more meaningful, I think, to drive on the large project client side, any different true change in behavior. Anyway, question 5, getting even deeper into the salacious. Do you believe the GC wants the consultant excluded from the selection award process to the SI because they want the freedom to delete or modify certain spec requirements in order to drive the price down? And there's actually 2 pieces to this as I'm listening to the dialogue. Does this happen only when there's a big gap that they haven't shared with the consultant between the GMP project and where they are, with the numbers, and they know they've got to close that gap? Or is this just a default that's done all the time because it's not about narrowing the gap between, the budget, and the price for the project, but it's just about making more money on it, and it's done all the time?
I think it depends on the quality of the GC a lot of the time. I mean, a lot of them will low bid the job and then they'll look for every opportunity to compromise the specifications and the requirements.
Well, but if, what we've seen a lot is the GC comes in and they put in a number for security based on about 2% or less of the information necessary to cover it.
2% is the number, isn't it?
Yeah. So they've come in. Yeah. So they've come in and made a dollar commitment before they know what the basis is. The GC, what they want is, they want to have a successful project in as easy and low-risk manner that they can do, the same as everybody else does. But because of the way, and if they've been burned by a consultant before, because rumor has it some of the consultants around are not the easiest, laid-back guys to work with the smallest egos in the world. So, if they've been burned, then sure, they want you out because you're a potential problem and risk for them. If they've had experience or had cases of experiences where the consultants have bailed them out and saved them money, they're going to be more open. So it really is, it's a piece of history as well as who are we trying to help, and are we doing it in a manner that remembers that everyone's trying to make a profit straightforward, and if I can help these 3 groups be more successful at lower cost, they're going to take the input from us a lot better when it is not going to be financially advantageous for them because we've demonstrated some integrity as a group, not just as an individual. But everyone wants to be able to control their destiny, especially when you've assumed risk because you've made commitments based on completely inadequate information.
But who's making those decisions? I see time and time again.
That's what
Robin Akins from Automatic Systems. Who is making those decisions as to if the GC is going to leave the security package out of their bids on these base building projects or not? I see, if they go back and forth and we're one of the most expensive components in the security package, so we see it and then they come back and they try to threaten and maneuver around and go direct and not abide by the specs. But there's always that question of whether the EC is going to carry the electrical package or if it's going to be the GC. But I'm just curious from a manufacturing standpoint, who's making those decisions? Is it the consultant? Is it the end user? Because there's always that dance.
Yeah, Robin, it really varies from project to project. It depends on the organizational structure of the project. One of the toughest parts, I think, we'll all agree for us as consultants, as liaisons to the client, if we're hired by the client. A lot of us are hired by the architects to represent the project team to help the client somewhere. And we're not directly involved. Sometimes I've gone on to projects where I've never been able to talk to an actual stakeholder, right? That's the challenge. But when I do, the question should always be, how do you want to buy this? And with security, there are a lot of pieces that go beyond the project, right? It's that relationship, as Ben talked about, if you've done the right thing in the marriage of the integrator to the owner, It's like sending one of your kids off to get married, right? They're going with somebody else, they're gonna make decisions without you from there on out sometimes. And they'll call you when really important stuff comes up. But, it's all in how you're gonna make that relationship work after the GC walks out the door. To the question up here, the reality is that sometimes the CM is making those decisions, the general contractor may be making those decisions, the procurement team. I mean, we're working on a project in DC with you. The procurement officer makes all of those contractual arrangements right down to the subs, not the general contractor. It's a very strange project, right? I've never been in I did 7 years at the UN, they never did it like that, right? So it varies from project to project. We have one of the most complex and most highly coordinated components of a project that there is, because we touch, in some cases, we can touch almost every single discipline. Electrical, hardware, carpentry, lighting. If you're doing it right, there isn't a piece of that building that you haven't laid eyes on. You should have reviewed every piece of the construction documents, and you should have been beating people about the head and shoulders if you found something that was contrary to what you're doing. But at the end of the day, I might not have any control over who buys a single piece of it. So I can't answer your question. I don't think anybody can answer your question directly. Here's the formula. Here's the formula.
The biggest thing when we get to be involved in the discussions of who the integrator should work for, we try to push for the owner, because like Chris said, that relationship is going to last hopefully a lot longer, and they'll be there to support the turnstiles or all the different components of the system. But yeah, we don't always get to have that discussion.
And the GC, if the GC was going to buy years 2 through 5 service and maintenance, it's out the door when they walk out the door. They made profit on that and then left the SI standing there going, what do we do? Right? Or the electrician bought it, and they own it, but they're out the door. How many times, right? So you try to push that relationship, as Chris is saying, but again, it's these big mega projects, forget it.
How many GCs about the business out there?
Well, we sort of slipped into the next 4 questions. So I'll slip, I'll just.
That was smooth,
but
that was smooth.
That was a smooth transition, I think. Yeah, so question 6 was, who are consultants most often contracted by, followed by who should consultants, be contracted by. I think that
Yeah, the architect should be up there as an option, as C.
Probably 80% of the time.
of who should they be?
No.
Of who they are, yes. Okay, that's.
Well, who should they be? I mean, it's perfectly natural to be contracted directly by the architect, because that's how you become, in a lot of cases, an integrated part of the process. And it's how we can avoid some of these. And so that's, very different model from my old firm, which was, 70% of our business was architects. We get brought in on teams. The company I'm with now, 70% of my business is directly with the owner. So we're always fighting, the title rate either way. I like being an integrated part of the team, but at some point, you also get shielded from some of the decision process. And the architect might just ship you a set of drawings that says, oh, we met with the owner yesterday, we're shifting these 4 doors, and wait a minute, you just destroyed the entire intent of what we're trying to do here. We had a discussion in Ed's thing about hardware yesterday. Fire exits, egress. Move 1 door, you can change the entire security strategy because of the path of egress. So I prefer to be hired by the client. I'd love to be hired by the architect, and I never want to be hired by the GC.
Yeah.
But if you want to focus on the mission that this organization needs to run, you need to be working as close as you can and specifically with that operations side of the client. if you're gonna, because your perspective, if your contract perspective ends when the keys get turned over, your influence beyond that is minimal. Because that's everyone who's going to be pre-filtering your information is going to already pre-filter it from that perspective of when the keys go over, I'm done. I've got all my money. And
But they came up with a solution for that. It's called the integrated delivery process, where everybody's making the decision. And nobody walks out the door at the end because you're all stuck with each other.
That's, you know, as my father, who was program management, project management in the military on mega projects, he says, you know, he only went through 18 briefings up the chain to be able to make a major change on his program until they revamped and revitalized and improved the procurement process. And the new process only took 18 briefings to get there as well. So, you know, it's one relief versus the other.
In terms of should, like Chris said, working for the architect is great because you're actually involved in the team, but just like the integrator, the consultant most likely is going to have a longer relationship with the client after the project, after you're done. So if you actually work for the client, work with their operations people, it ends up a better long-term relationship.
So the next two questions kind of, again, slightly, paired with this, who are security integrators most often contracted by the client versus the GC? I don't ever remember working for an architect as the systems integrator. And who should the security systems integrator be contracted by the client and the GC? And that's the lone voice of the integrator in the world. You know, I'd rather put pins in my eyes in most cases than, you know, even 2 layers down. When you're under the GEC, you're under the GC. It's one of the reasons that in my HPE days, we made a decision to go public, you know, to have the capital, to have the bonding level requirements, to prime the job, or at least prime the security piece and the electrical for the security piece under me so I can control my own destiny and get at least a layer or 2 closer to the end user who, at the end of the day, if they don't value this system, if it doesn't work for them, it's just bad for everybody in the ecosystem.
And you're part of Local 3, and in New York, and then look at the local in Chicago and Boston, sabotage starts to happen. We've got the base electrician, the base EC, and then you're priming your own, and there's all this going
No,
on.
I'm not saying it's my people. I'm
No.
solving, yeah. In some cases, I'll solve the ones that are doing
The base building, but if you don't, then we've got another challenge, right?
Yeah, you know, I thought, but you know what?
Sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but there's other people you can get, you said the GC, I mean, in some instances now we're seeing an integrated delivery process that the CM is signing those contracts. And the general contractor is really just serving as our general coordinator at the end of the day.
But oftentimes the base electrical doesn't want to do the small stuff. There was one guy, you know, I think he's retired now, Alex from his work. He said to me, Jim, the smaller the wire, the higher the price. I want to get into it, big pipe it and out. This little stuff, he says, you know, I don't want to do that. And so in many cases, that's a relief to them. It's a distraction, and they welcome, bringing in the trades to do the low voltage.
But then the GC forces them to take it. And it becomes that, just as you said, it's a nuisance. Why is security so far behind? Well, it's under the EC and they haven't put the conduit in for security yet because it's only this big.
We have 2 guys working on it.
Yeah, or they're trying to split all the staff and this is just another nuisance. They gotta take, I'll get to it when I get
The
to it.
guy who knows how to do it is on furlough.
And in the meantime, the carpenters are there. Who's supposed to install the lock? I don't know, it's electrified. Did the door come drilled already? Do I have to drill it? I've seen the best of it, I've seen the worst of it, and I still don't know the answer to, I know the answer that I'd like to see. I always want to see the security integrator contracted directly to the owner at some point to avoid that conundrum of, ownership post facto, right? Don't walk away from the job, or who owns the piece of paper that it's on. Because the owner's not going to call to the general contractor to say, I got a problem with my door. They want to call the integrator. So I like that relationship. There's a trust factor that's built, you know, the same as the one you've tried to build with your client. But I understand how projects need to function. And in some cases, there are no other choices.
And sometimes when the integrator doesn't work for the GC, then the GC refuses to coordinate with the integrator, and that causes a ton of problems with the job. So if
Oh,
they
you want
do,
access to the lift?
right? So if they actually work for the GC, then the GC has built their fees in to manage the integrator, and then that actually helps the coordination, helps the process.
And what we put in on several projects to address just that was, there was a direct contract of the integrator with the owner. But there was an override fee that if they had been part of the GC, that was paid to the GC as a coordination management fee, so that they bridged over. But that required one change order to the GC's contract, as well as then the contract with the integration. And that was hard to sell. You had to get someone who had a project management background, or at least an understanding in procurement, that could see that, hey, this makes sense to be able to do that. But once that was brought in and legitimately looked at, that alleviated a bulk of the question of the issues. You still had some because you had different schedules driving it, but you could actually start to fight fair. So could you pass the mic?
Sure. One big cultural change in the industry that is beginning to occur and increasingly will occur is that these systems are starting to move under IT cabling and structured cabling and be conducted from a project management standpoint as an IT project, not as an electrical project. And that has a number of consequences that fall out of that decision, among which are who is contracting that. So typically that falls over to the client. That's a direct client contract. The coordination override that you mentioned is something that we like to see and suggest on those. And on those projects, the one thing that really worries me about most of them is that a qualified security consultant is often not included in that process. Because what you have very often is an IT integrator who's doing his maybe second or third security project, and he's making all these decisions from the pinnacle of his modest knowledge. And so it's something that the consulting community, this is another compelling reason that we need to get serious about IT consulting, not simply security consulting. Because we have to have at least visibility into that, if not control the process, in order to assure the integrity of the whole security system.
I totally agree, Tom. That's a great point, and you're right, it's happening every single day. What I like about it, though, is the GC's afraid of the IT department.
Oh, yeah.
Because they swing the biggest stick there. Their rooms get built first. Their stuff gets cabled first. They worry about its integration into the furniture systems, the doorways, the displays, because they know at the end of the day that if that's not all running, that the project was a failure.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like being part of that process, and I like making friends with the IT guys as much as I hate them sometimes, because they make our job overly cumbersome, they overcomplicate the things we need to do, they slow us down, but they carry one of the biggest sticks there. And by the way, they sit on the periphery 90% of the time until it is the last minute. Oh, wait, I want to change everything. We just adopted a new technology. And the project team says, okay, right? What are you gonna do? It's how the business runs. So as we integrate into that more and more, I'm seeing the benefits of it as much as I have pushed back against it for so many years.
So we got about 10 minutes left. I've got 4 more questions, and then I have a grand finale.
We didn't answer those other 4 questions yet?
Not yet. However, like these, they're all going, I mean, it's not hard to see where I'm drilling at. Joe, question?
One quick question about keeping the GC and the integrator separate up to a point. For example, a project that's recently completed, we bid the electrical contract, or the security systems contract. It was a big project, so we bid the security systems contract all by itself. You know, it was a committee decision, all of those sorts of things, points, evaluations. It was a pre-qualification, and then RFQ would go out to the highest ones that got the highest. And then once we made that pick, we assigned that integrator to the CG construction, GC, I'm sorry. And so and then we had to pay the GC another 15% to manage that whole process. I don't know if you guys talk about that or have any issues with that.
Nope. It's exactly how it should go. It's exactly how it should go.
It's so easy that way.
Yeah.
He gets selected outside of the GC making those decisions by the people who know about it, and then he's brought back into the fold when the GC is.
That's ideal. That ties right to what Chris was saying. Hey, look, the GC is needed for the coordination process. You know, and if they're paid specifically for it, then they value it. I had the GC say to me on one of these projects that these guys involved out, you guys all know each other, you coordinate amongst yourselves. They didn't want to be part of the process. I'm like, my eyes are rolling like I'm in Vegas. I said, are you kidding me? But, let me go through these last 4 individual fireworks so I get right to the grand finale. So on my question to Ed, I said, so does the client or the client's rep, kind of talked about this, on large projects seek what is really in the client's best interest? My unabashed opinion, obviously, here, and I think I'd share yours, no, because they isolate the operations people, way too often. And how is the client have both a how often the client has a development team and an operation team? I mean, the development team in some of these organizations treats their operations department worse than the worst now, because they really interfere. 5 minutes left. I really don't.
We don't have enough time to choose.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
And this is
Enough said.
So 11, which of the following entities are most often incentivized to make decisions in the client's long-term best interest? It's rhetorical to 10. 12, who most often influences the client's decision on how to approach, structure, and execute an integrated project? And again, here it's the consultant, the general contractor, integrator. I agree, you should have the architect, as an element in there as well, and the manufacturer, just to cover everybody. 13, who should have the greatest influence on the client's decision on how to go forward. And here's the grand finale. It was so big it didn't even get a number. Are consultants best positioned as trusted advisors to the client's C-level management to overcome pressure from the client's development team and or the GC to retain control of the structure and process on large projects? And I offer up 3 potentials. I said, yes, it can be done. B is yes, but the chance of success is slim. And C, no, because construction culture and process are too entrenched to ever be changed. Which I don't believe if we leverage the force of public opinion.
This, for me, circles back to the beginning of, that's that program management view. And that's how you can overcome and work within providing you're setting the ditches on the side of the road that project management team, the deployment team has to follow. And As long as you keep them out of the ditch and you keep them going to what is the definition of success that has to be achieved. And it's that role that has to be trusted at the higher level. And if that's successful, then all the other pieces are maintained in that incentive to validate that the dollars are in line, the responsibilities are in line, and the decisions that are impacting schedule, dollars, and results are at least addressed under a common context.
Every project we ever go into, the first thing, one of the tasks is we're going to meet with senior management. We want to understand their issues relative to security, safety, and how they want it to be impactful in their organization. I try my best from the very start to get buy-in at that level, even if I'm never going to see them again. Because my POC here is that they've bought into the premise that I've presented, and they're going to back that. It's the biggest, it's the most successful tool I have moving forward, because everybody's job is, they believe, is dependent on fulfilling that request at the C-suite. I worked for Fidelity Investments for a number of years. People used to, Ned Johnson was the chairman. People used to walk around and go, well, Ned said. I actually went up and talked to Ned. I didn't care. So I was able to say Ned said, and I try to do that on every project I'm on, because it is the only way to get everybody else to listen.
So, talking earlier about risk assumption, and I try to make sure that I get at least periodic meetings with the C-level management and make sure you're addressing those assumptions. If the project team says, cut 10% of your budget, okay, what are the risks that you are accepting? And I want to make sure that that management team understands exactly what those risks are that the team is trying to accept for them. I don't want just the architect or the GC to say, yeah, that's fine. The owner, the client, and the top people there have to be able to make that decision for the company.
And I'll go one last thing. We've got a minute left or so. Tom said it about getting involved with the IT department and becoming more integrated into that piece. And I think part of what's happened here, we talked about all the cyber issues. The bridge between physical and logical really can't be understated. The interdependency of one another moving forward in today's age can't be understated either. And so with that, you really have to be able to understand the risk from every angle, including the cyber piece, because it is ultimately, as I said, one door change can change the entire use of the building. One system change, one network change can change the entire functionality of what we do. So, but they all buy into the risk issue on cyber even more than physical now. So the more you marry them together, the better success you can have.
Good. Wow. We actually getting close to within a minute. Listen, I thank everybody for coming, participating. I thank my esteemed panel for their contributions, and any follow-up Q&As. Anybody who doesn't have my business card, please come up to me and get it. I'm about to follow up with you later. This is I think this is the subject that is crucial, to fix. And one of the reasons why I was so, thrilled, really, to come to this conference when Ray asked me to come and be the voice of the integrator is I believe that these stakeholders, the specifiers, are our last best hope, to truly, get through to the owners, as to how to construct and run these projects. And as the risks get greater and more perilous, the failures, the consequences of the failures, in the old days, it used to be, well, they're going to maybe waste some money and blah, blah, blah. But now, when you look at the risks, the trepidations by messing with the design or not properly coordinating with IT or having integrators in there that had cameras and leave default passwords in there and all these portals, into your system, I mean, the ramifications and the threat at the C-level are much greater. So they really can't advocate that responsibility just to the development group that doesn't have ownership of the consequences, long term. So again, much appreciated. Ray would very much appreciate you filling out the bingo cards and rating the session, so he has some guidance for, curriculum for next year.